Dr. Lisa Harper wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stepped out of the helicopter. The Alaskan wilderness stretched endlessly before her team, thick forests of pine and spruce covering rolling hills that seemed to go on forever. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine needles and wild flowers. She had been studying strange electromagnetic readings from this area for 3 months, and finally the government had approved her expedition to investigate. Captain Jake Morrison jumped down from the helicopter behind her, his military boots hitting the soft forest floor with a thud. He was a tall man with short brown hair and serious eyes that constantly scanned their surroundings. The military had insisted on sending him along as their liaison, though Lisa suspected he was really there to make sure she did not find anything too dangerous without proper oversight. Tony Rodriguez emerged last, carrying 2 large cases filled with scanning equipment. He was shorter than Morrison, but built like someone who spent his free time fixing engines and building things with his hands. His dark hair was already messy from the helicopter ride, and he had that excited look he always got when there was interesting technology to investigate. The helicopter pilot gave them a thumbs up and lifted off, leaving the 3 alone in the vast wilderness. According to their instruments, whatever was causing the electromagnetic readings should be about 2 miles northeast of their landing spot. Lisa shouldered her pack and started walking, following the compass reading on her tablet. The forest was quieter than she had expected. Birds chirped occasionally in the distance, but there was an odd stillness to the air that made her feel like they were walking through a library instead of wild nature. Morrison noticed it too, his hand resting casually near his sidearm as they walked. After an hour of hiking through increasingly thick vegetation, Rodriguez stopped and pulled out his electromagnetic detector. The device immediately started beeping rapidly, its screen showing readings that made his eyes widen. He looked up at Lisa with excitement written all over his face. "Whatever is out here, it is big," he said, adjusting the settings on his device. "The electromagnetic signature is unlike anything I have ever seen. It is not natural, that much I can tell you for certain." They continued walking, pushing through bushes and climbing over fallen logs. The beeping from Rodriguez's detector grew, faster and louder with each step. Soon they could hear a low humming sound in the air, so quiet it was almost below the range of human hearing. Lisa stopped suddenly when she saw it through the trees ahead. At first, her brain could not process what she was looking at. Rising from the forest floor was what appeared to be a massive crystalline structure, easily 800 feet long and 200 feet high. Its surface was not like any crystal she had ever seen before. Instead of being clear or colored like normal crystals, this one seemed to shift between different hues as the sunlight hit it from various angles. Morrison drew his weapon instinctively, then realized how pointless that gesture was against something so enormous. He kept the gun in his hand anyway, more for his own comfort than because he thought it would be useful. The 3 approached slowly, their feet crunching on fallen leaves and small branches. As they got closer, Lisa realized that what she had, initially taken for a natural crystal formation, was actually something far more complex. The surface was covered in patterns that looked almost like writing, but in no language she had ever encountered. More importantly, sections of the crystal appeared to be damaged, with large cracks running along its surface and pieces missing entirely. Tony set down his equipment and began taking readings. His electromagnetic detector was now beeping so fast, it sounded like a continuous tone. He pulled out additional instruments and started a more detailed scan of the structure. "Lisa, you need to see this," he called out, staring at his tablet screen. "This thing is not just giving off electromagnetic signals. It is actively scanning us right back." She hurried over to look at his readings. The data showed complex energy patterns moving through the crystal structure, patterns that seemed to respond to their presence. As they moved around the object, the energy flows inside it shifted and changed, as if it was tracking their movement. Morrison had been walking along the perimeter of the structure, looking for any obvious entrances or weak points. He called out from the far side, his voice echoing strangely off the crystal surface. "Over here! I found something." Lisa and Tony hurried around to where Morrison was standing. There, partially hidden by overgrown vines and small trees, was what could only be described as a doorway. It was roughly oval-shaped and about 10 feet tall, though it was currently sealed with the same crystalline material as the rest of the structure. Rodriguez immediately began scanning the door area with his instruments. The electromagnetic readings here were different, more focused, and intense. He spent several minutes studying the data before looking up at his companions. "I think this entire structure is actually a vehicle of some kind," he said slowly, as if he could barely believe his own words. "The energy patterns suggest some kind of propulsion system, though it appears to be completely inactive right now." Lisa felt her heart racing as the implications hit her. If Rodriguez was right, they were not looking at some strange natural formation or even an unusual building. They were looking at a spacecraft, and based on its design and technology, it was definitely not human in origin. She walked closer to the sealed doorway, running her hands along its smooth surface. The material felt warm to the touch, and she could feel a very faint vibration running through it. As her fingers traced the patterns carved into the surface, she noticed that some of them seemed to glow very faintly when she touched them. "Morrison, we need to contact headquarters immediately," she said, stepping back from the door. "This is way beyond what we were expecting to find." Morrison was already reaching for his satellite communicator, but he paused when Rodriguez called out urgently. "Wait! Something is happening." The sealed doorway was beginning to change. The solid crystal material was becoming transparent, then translucent, and finally it simply faded away entirely, leaving an open entrance into the dark interior of the structure. A soft blue light emanated from somewhere inside, just bright enough to see that there was indeed a space beyond the doorway. Lisa could make out what appeared to be a corridor or hallway stretching into the structure. The three stood at the entrance for several long minutes, none of them quite ready to be the first to step inside. Finally, Lisa took a deep breath and moved forward. As a scientist, she knew this was the discovery of a lifetime, possibly the most important find in human history. Her fear was overwhelmed by curiosity and the desperate need to understand what they had found. The interior was unlike anything she could have imagined. The walls, floor, and ceiling were made of the same crystalline material as the exterior, but here it was perfectly smooth and seemed to provide its own soft illumination. The corridor stretched ahead of them, branching off in several directions. Rodriguez followed her inside, his instruments detecting even stranger energy readings within the structure. Morrison came last, his weapon still drawn and his eyes constantly moving as he tried to watch all directions at once. As they walked deeper into the structure, they began to see signs of damage. Sections of the walls were cracked or missing entirely, and in some places the blue illumination flickered or was completely dark. Clearly, whatever had brought this vessel to Earth had not been a gentle landing. Lisa stopped when they reached what appeared to be a large central chamber. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that stretched up into darkness above them. Banks of dark, inactive equipment lined the walls, and in the center of the room was a raised platform containing what could only be described as control stations. Everything was clearly designed for beings much taller than humans, with controls and displays positioned at heights that would be comfortable for someone 8 or 9 feet tall. The symbols and markings on the equipment were completely alien, though there was something almost familiar about their arrangement and organization. Rodriguez was taking readings throughout the chamber, his excitement growing with each new measurement. After several minutes of scanning, he looked up at Lisa with an expression of amazement. "This ship has been here for at least 30 years, maybe longer," he said. "But here is the really incredible part. Most of the technology appears to have been deliberately removed or destroyed, but the manufacturing systems are still intact. Whoever was here took the finished products but left behind the means to make new ones." Lisa realized the full significance of what they had discovered. They had not just found evidence of alien life, or even alien technology. They had found an alien factory, abandoned and waiting for someone clever enough to figure out how to use it. Morrison finally lowered his weapon as he grasped what they were dealing with. This was not a threat to be fought, but an opportunity that could change the course of human civilization forever. He activated his satellite communicator and began the call that would bring the full resources of the government to this remote spot in the Alaskan wilderness. As he spoke into the device, requesting immediate secure transport and a full scientific team, Lisa continued exploring the chamber. 6 months after the discovery, the remote Alaskan forest had been transformed into the most classified facility on Earth. Massive concrete structures now surrounded the alien ship, hidden under carefully constructed camouflage that made the entire complex invisible to satellite observation. Dr. Kevin Walsh walked through the main laboratory, reviewing the latest reports from his engineering teams. Walsh was a thin man with graying hair who had spent most of his career designing advanced propulsion systems for NASA. He had been skeptical when the military first approached him about this project, but one look at the alien manufacturing systems had convinced him this was the most important work he would ever do. The technology they were studying was centuries ahead of anything humans had developed. Commander Amy Foster stood near a bank of monitors showing feeds from security cameras positioned throughout the facility. She was responsible for making sure that no information about their work leaked to the outside world, and she took that responsibility very seriously. Her short blonde hair was always perfectly neat, and her uniform never showed a single wrinkle, even after 18-hour workdays. The alien ship itself sat in the center of the largest chamber, surrounded by scaffolding and work platforms that allowed the human researchers to access every part of its structure. Teams of specialists worked around the clock, carefully mapping and studying each component of the vessel. Tony Rodriguez had become the leading expert on the alien manufacturing systems, spending most of his time in what they had designated as Manufacturing Bay Alpha. The chamber contained dozens of devices that seemed designed to create materials and components at the molecular level. After months of careful study, he was finally beginning to understand how they worked. The alien builders had used principles that were completely different from human manufacturing. Instead of cutting, welding, and assembling parts, their machines grew materials atom by atom, shaping them with controlled energy fields into exactly the forms they needed. The process was incredibly efficient and could create materials that were stronger and lighter than anything humans had ever produced. Dr. Claire Peterson worked alongside Rodriguez, focusing on understanding the materials the alien systems could produce. She was a small woman with dark hair who had earned her reputation by developing new metal alloys for the aerospace industry. The alien materials fascinated her because they seemed to violate several laws of physics that she had considered unbreakable. The hull of the ship was made from something that behaved like metal, but could become transparent when certain energy frequencies were applied to it. Other materials could change their density or conductivity based on electrical signals sent through them. Some components seemed to be part machine and part living tissue, though they had been dormant for so long that it was difficult to study their biological aspects. Peterson had successfully convinced one of the smaller manufacturing units to produce a sample of hull material. The process had taken 3 days of careful adjustment, but the result was a piece of metal the size of her hand that weighed almost nothing but could not be damaged by any tool they had tried against it. Dr. Lisa Harper continued to lead the archaeological aspects of the investigation, trying to understand who had built the ship and why they had abandoned it. Her team had found evidence that the vessel had been deliberately sabotaged before being left behind. Critical systems had been removed or destroyed, and all computer memories had been wiped clean. However, the manufacturing systems had been overlooked, probably because the aliens viewed them as infrastructure rather than technology. It was like leaving behind a factory building while taking all the products and blueprints. The humans now had the capability to produce alien materials and components, but they had to figure out what to build and how to build it. Jake Morrison had been promoted to head of facility security, and he spent his days coordinating with military intelligence to assess potential threats. They had detected no signs of alien activity since the discovery, but everyone understood that the ship's builders might eventually return to claim their property. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez successfully activated one of the larger manufacturing units. The machine was roughly the size of a school bus and filled with intricate mechanisms that hummed with barely contained energy. When he fed raw materials into its input chamber, the device produced a component that perfectly matched one of the damaged parts they had removed from the ship's interior. Walsh immediately understood the implications. They were not just studying alien technology anymore. They had the ability to repair and potentially improve it. The manufacturing systems could create new parts based on templates stored in their memory, but they could also be programmed to produce variations and modifications of those designs. Foster saw the military potential immediately. The alien materials were superior to anything in human arsenals, and the manufacturing systems could produce them in large quantities. She began developing plans to weaponize the technology, imagining armor that could stop any projectile and weapons that could deliver devastating power. The debate over how to use their discoveries became intense. Walsh argued that they should focus on understanding the technology completely before attempting any major modifications. Harper wanted to continue studying the archaeological aspects to better understand the aliens' intentions. Foster pushed for immediate military applications, pointing out that they had no idea when the aliens might return. The discussion became urgent when long-range deep space monitoring stations detected unusual objects moving through the outer solar system. The objects were too distant to identify clearly, but their movement patterns suggested they were under intelligent control rather than being natural phenomena. Computer analysis of the trajectories indicated that whatever was out there would reach Earth's vicinity in approximately 18 to 24 months. The timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. It appeared that someone was finally coming to check on the abandoned ship. Walsh made the decision to accelerate their research efforts. If they were going to face the ship's original builders, they needed to understand the technology well enough to either negotiate from a position of strength or defend themselves if negotiations failed. Rodriguez began working with the manufacturing systems to produce components for human-designed modifications to the alien ship. His first project was creating a human-compatible control interface that would allow them to operate the ship's systems without needing to be 9 feet tall. Peterson focused on developing hybrid materials that combined alien and human design principles. She discovered that the alien manufacturing systems could work with human blueprints if the designs were translated into the proper format. This opened up the possibility of creating entirely new technologies that used the best aspects of both civilizations. Foster began planning defensive modifications to the ship and the facility. If the approaching objects turned out to be hostile, she wanted to be ready for a fight. The alien manufacturing systems could produce incredibly strong armor plating and energy projection systems that could serve as weapons. Harper continued studying the alien symbols and markings throughout the ship, hoping to understand more about its builders and their intentions. She made a crucial discovery when she realized that many of the symbols were actually mathematical equations and engineering specifications. The aliens had built their language around precise technical concepts rather than abstract ideas. As the months passed, the alien ship slowly began to change under human modification. New components appeared alongside the original systems, created by human engineers using alien manufacturing techniques. The vessel was becoming something hybrid, part alien exploration ship and part human fortress. The manufacturing systems proved to be incredibly adaptable, capable of producing almost anything the humans could design. Walsh's team created improved power systems that could generate more energy than the original alien designs. Peterson developed new hull materials that were even stronger than what the aliens had used. Rodriguez built control systems that allowed humans to operate technology originally designed for much larger beings. Foster oversaw the installation of defensive systems throughout the ship and facility, energy barriers that could stop incoming projectiles, sensor arrays that could detect approaching threats from millions of miles away, and weapon systems that could deliver precise strikes across vast distances. The work was exhausting and dangerous. Several researchers were injured when alien systems unexpectedly activated during their investigations. One entire section of the ship had to be sealed off after a failed experiment created a localized gravity field that crushed everything within a 50-foot radius. But progress continued steadily. The humans were not just learning to use alien technology, they were improving it, adapting it to human needs and human thinking. The ship was becoming something its original builders had never intended, a fusion of two completely different approaches to engineering and design. Walsh often stood in the main chamber late at night, looking up at the transformed vessel and wondering what they were creating. The aliens had built an exploration ship designed for peaceful contact with other species. The underground facility had grown into a small city buried beneath the Alaskan wilderness. Carlos Rivera walked through the main weapons development lab, checking on the progress of his teams. The young engineer had been promoted to head of weapons research after demonstrating an unusual talent for turning peaceful alien technology into instruments of destruction. Rivera stopped at a workstation where Dr. Helen Martinez was interfacing with what they had started calling the Guide. The alien artificial intelligence had been discovered 3 months earlier, hidden in secondary memory systems that the ship's original crew had overlooked when they wiped the main computers. Martinez was the only human who had managed to establish reliable communication with the AI. The Guide manifested as shifting patterns of light on specially designed displays, communicating through mathematical concepts and engineering diagrams, rather than words. It had been horrified to discover what the humans were doing to its ship, but had gradually become fascinated by their approach to problem-solving. Guide is showing me the weapon systems used by something called the Vashitai. Martinez explained as Rivera approached her workstation. According to the information it's providing, these are the beings in the ships approaching our solar system. They are not the same species that built this vessel. Rivera studied the holographic displays showing alien weapon designs. The Vashtai used energy-based systems that could overload electronic circuits and melt through most known materials. Their tactics relied on overwhelming firepower delivered from long range, destroying enemy ships before they could get close enough to fight. "Back! Show me their defensive systems," Rivera requested, and Martinez relayed the question to the guide through her interface. New diagrams appeared, depicting energy shields that could deflect or absorb incoming attacks. The technology was impressive, but Rivera could already see weaknesses that human weapons could exploit. The Vashatai had been fighting the same types of enemies for so long that their defenses were optimized for specific kinds of attacks. Dr. Walsh joined them at the workstation, carrying a tablet displaying the latest reports from his engineering teams. The ship's transformation was nearly complete, but every day brought new challenges as human and alien systems were integrated in ways neither species had originally intended. "Guide keeps warning us that our modifications are excessive," Walsh said, looking at the AI's display patterns. "It seems to think we're making the ship too aggressive for a first contact situation." Martinez laughed, a sound that had become rare in the facility as the deadline approached. "Guide doesn't understand human nature. We don't build anything that can't also be used as a weapon if necessary. It's just how we think." Rivera nodded in agreement. His teams had spent months studying every component of the alien ship, not to understand its original purpose, but to figure out how it could be weaponized. The manufacturing systems that were designed to create exploration tools now produced railguns capable of firing projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The main weapons lab occupied an entire level of the underground facility. Banks of alien manufacturing systems worked constantly, producing components for weapon systems that combined human tactical thinking with alien materials and power sources. The results were devastating in their effectiveness. Energy weapons that could channel the output of a small star through focusing crystals grown in alien fabricators. Kinetic projectiles made from materials so dense that they could punch through anything the Vashtai might use for armor. Defensive systems that could manipulate matter at the molecular level to deflect or absorb incoming attacks. Commander Foster walked through the weapons lab with the satisfaction of someone watching a plan come together. The ship bristled with armaments that would have seemed like magic to humans just 2 years earlier. Every system had been tested and retested until they were confident in their reliability. "Guide keeps asking why we need so many weapons," Foster said to Rivera as they paused near a particularly large cannon installation. "I tried to explain that humans prefer to be over-prepared rather than under-prepared, but I don't think it understands the concept." The AI had been particularly disturbed by human modifications to the ship's manufacturing systems. The aliens had designed them to create tools and materials for peaceful exploration. The humans had reprogrammed them to mass-produce weapons and ammunition for extended combat operations. Rivera had discovered that the alien manufacturing systems were incredibly flexible, capable of producing almost anything if given proper instructions. His teams had created blueprints for weapons that used alien materials in ways the original builders had never considered. The ship's main gun was Rivera's proudest achievement. It used alien energy projection technology combined with human understanding of physics to create a weapon that could deliver planet-cracking levels of destruction. The targeting systems were enhanced with human-developed computers that could track and engage multiple targets simultaneously. Dr. Peterson approached the group, carrying a sample of the latest hull material her team had developed. The alien. Manufacturing systems had been programmed to create armor plating that was not only stronger than the original design, but could actively respond to incoming attacks. The reactive armor is performing beyond our expectations, Peterson reported, handing the sample to Foster for examination. It can detect incoming projectiles and adjust its density and configuration to provide optimal protection. Guide is amazed that we managed to improve on the original design. Foster examined the material, noting how it seemed to shift and flow slightly in her hands. The armor could become harder than diamond when struck by high-speed projectiles, or flow-like, liquid to absorb energy-based attacks. It was a perfect fusion of alien materials, science, and human defensive thinking. The ship's power systems had been completely rebuilt to support the massive energy requirements of the human weapons. 3 fusion reactors worked in parallel with the original alien power cores, generating enough electricity to supply a medium-sized city. All of that power could be channeled through the ship's weapons in coordinated strikes that would overwhelm any defensive system. Martinez continued her work with the guide, extracting every piece of information the AI possessed about Vashatai, technology, and tactics. The artificial intelligence seemed conflicted about helping humans prepare for war, but it had become convinced that the approaching fleet represented a serious threat to both species. "Guide is showing me something interesting," Martinez called out, drawing the attention of the other researchers. "The Vashtai have never encountered weapons like the ones we're building. Their experience is limited to fighting species that use similar technology to their own." New displays appeared showing historical Vashatai battles. Their enemies had always used energy-based weapons and similar defensive systems. Combat followed predictable patterns, with victory going to whoever could generate the most firepower, or maintain their shields longest. Rivera studied the tactical information with growing excitement. Human weapons operated on completely different principles, using kinetic energy and exotic materials that Vashatai defenses were not designed to handle. Their shields might stop energy beams, but they would be useless against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. "They fight like they're playing a game with established rules," Rivera observed. "We're about to show them what happens when someone doesn't follow those rules." Walsh was less enthusiastic about the implications. The ship they were creating was becoming something far more dangerous than anything the aliens had originally built. He worried about what would happen if their first contact with another species began with violence instead of negotiation. Guide keeps emphasizing that the original ship was designed for peaceful exploration, Walsh said, looking at the AI's display. "It thinks we're missing the point of first contact entirely." Foster had no such concerns. The approaching Vashtai fleet represented a potential threat to human survival, and she was determined to be ready for any possibility. If peaceful contact was possible, the humans would negotiate from a position of strength. If violence was inevitable, they would be prepared to defend themselves effectively. The ship's transformation was nearly complete. It no longer resembled the exploration vessel that had crashed in the Alaskan forest decades earlier. Every surface bristled with weapons or sensor arrays. The hull was covered in reactive armor that could withstand attacks that would destroy conventional spacecraft. Guide had finally stopped protesting the modifications, though it continued to express concern about human aggressive tendencies. The AI had begun providing tactical advice, helping the humans optimize their weapons for maximum effectiveness against Vashatai technology. Rivera's teams worked around the clock to complete the final weapon installations. The ship now carried enough firepower to engage an entire fleet, with ammunition manufacturing systems that could replace expended ordnance during combat. Every human innovation had been focused on creating the most effective fighting machine possible. The facility's command center had been relocated inside the ship itself, surrounded by layers of alien armor and human defensive systems. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of what was now designated as UES Defiance, watching the tactical displays show the approaching alien fleet. 12 ships had entered the outer solar system, moving in formation toward Earth with the confidence of predators who had never encountered serious resistance. Blake was a career Navy officer who had commanded nuclear submarines before being selected to lead humanity's first interstellar warship. The bridge had been completely redesigned to accommodate human crews while maintaining access to the ship's alien systems. Guides' displays showed constantly changing patterns as the AI provided real-time intelligence about the approaching Vashti vessels. Dr. Martinez sat at her interface station, translating the AI's mathematical communications into information the human crew could understand. Guide confirms that the lead ship belongs to War Commander Zeph Cole, Martinez reported, studying the shifting light patterns on her screens. He's considered one of their most experienced fleet commanders, with victories against dozens of different species. Blake nodded grimly. The humans would be facing an enemy with centuries of combat experience, commanding ships that had been designed specifically for interstellar warfare. The only advantage they possessed was the element of surprise and weapons that operated on principles the Vashti had never encountered. Commander Foster stood at the tactical station, monitoring the status of their weapon systems. Every gun was loaded, every shield generator was active, and the manufacturing systems were producing additional ammunition in case the battle lasted longer than expected. The ship was as ready for combat as human engineering could make it. Tony Rodriguez worked at the engineering station, keeping watch over the hybrid power systems that fed energy to their weapons. The fusion reactors were running at maximum output, while the alien power cores provided the exotic energy needed for their more advanced systems. Everything was functioning perfectly, but he knew that would change quickly once combat began. The Vashti fleet maintained formation as it approached, clearly expecting to find a derelict vessel waiting for salvage. Their communications were being intercepted and translated by Guide, revealing their assumption that they were dealing with primitive beings who had stumbled across abandoned technology. "They're requesting that we surrender the ship and submit to interrogation," Martinez translated as new symbols appeared on Guide's displays. "War Commander Zeph Cole wants to know how we acquired Keth Mori technology and what we've done with the original crew." Blake activated the ship's communication system, broadcasting on the frequencies the aliens were using. His message was simple and direct, designed to establish humanity's position without revealing too much about their capabilities. "Unknown vessels, you are in sovereign human space. State your intentions or withdraw immediately." The response from the Vashti fleet was immediate and predictable. War Commander Zeph Cole's voice came through the speakers, translated by the ship's computers into English. The alien commander sounded amused by what he clearly considered an absurd demand from a primitive species. "Small beings, you possess technology that does not belong to you. Surrender immediately, and you will be granted quick deaths. Resist, and you will suffer before you die." Foster smiled grimly at the threat. The Vashti were about to learn that humans did not respond well to ultimatums. She began powering up the ship's main weapons, targeting systems locking onto the alien vessels as they continued their approach. Blake gave the order that would change the course of human history. "All stations, this is the captain. We are now at battle stations. Prepare to engage the enemy. The Vashtai fleet spread into attack formation, clearly intending to disable the human ship with overwhelming firepower. Guides' displays showed their tactical analysis, revealing that the aliens expected a brief engagement, followed by the capture of intact technology. Guide says they're charging their primary weapons, Martinez reported. They plan to overload our power systems with energy discharges, then board the ship to capture survivors for questioning. The first exchange of fire would shock both sides. Vashatai energy beams struck the Defiance's hull, expecting to penetrate or disable the ship's systems. Instead, the reactive armor absorbed the energy and channeled it directly into the ship's power grid, actually strengthening their defensive capabilities. Foster's response demonstrated the difference between human and alien tactical thinking. Instead of returning fire with similar weapons, she targeted the Vashtai ships with kinetic projectiles fired from railguns that accelerated solid metal rods to significant fractions of light speed. The Vashtai energy shields, designed to deflect or absorb energy-based attacks, were completely useless against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic velocities. The first human salvo punched through 3 enemy ships, leaving expanding clouds of debris where sophisticated warships had existed moments earlier. War Commander Zeph Cole's voice filled the communication channels, no longer amused but filled with shock and confusion. His fleet had just lost a quarter of its strength to weapons that should not have been able to penetrate their defenses. Blake ordered a full attack, and the Defiance unleashed the full fury of human military engineering, enhanced by alien technology. Energy weapons designed by Rivera's teams carved through enemy hulls, while kinetic projectiles shattered ships that had survived hundreds of previous battles. The Vashatai tried to adapt their tactics, spreading their formation and attempting to use their superior numbers to overwhelm the human ship. But every adjustment they made only revealed new weaknesses that human weapons could exploit. Guide provided constant tactical updates, analyzing Vashtai movements and suggesting optimal targeting solutions. The AI had overcome its initial horror at the violence and was now fully committed to helping the humans defend themselves. Foster coordinated the ship's weapons with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. Each system fired in sequence, maximizing the damage inflicted while conserving ammunition for extended combat. The manufacturing systems continued producing new projectiles and energy cells even as the existing ones were expended. The battle lasted less than 30 minutes, but it demonstrated the futility of Vashatai tactics against human innovation. 8 alien ships were destroyed outright, their hulls shattered by weapons they could not defend against. 3 more suffered critical damage and were forced to retreat, their commanders finally understanding that they faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. War Commander Zeph Cole survived the engagement, but his flagship was severely damaged and his confidence was completely shattered. He had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries without suffering a single defeat, and now he had lost most of his ships to beings he had considered primitive savages. The Defiance had suffered damage as well, though not from enemy weapons. The strain of channeling so much power through hybrid systems had caused several overloads, and 2 human crew members had been killed when a power coupling exploded. But the ship remained fully operational and ready for additional combat. Blake surveyed the battlefield through the ship's sensors, watching the surviving Vashatai vessels retreat toward the outer solar system. The first contact between humanity and an interstellar empire had begun with violence, but the humans had established their position clearly. Guide is receiving communications from the retreating ships, Martinez reported. War Commander Zeph Cole, is transmitting a detailed report to his superiors, including tactical data about our weapons and defensive systems. Foster understood the implications immediately. The Vashti would return with larger fleets and new tactics designed to counter human advantages. This had been only the first battle in what would likely become a prolonged conflict. Rodriguez worked frantically to repair the damage caused by the engagement, using the ship's manufacturing systems to create replacement components for the overloaded systems. The hybrid technology had performed better than expected, but it was clear that sustained combat would require additional modifications. Blake addressed his crew over the ship's communication system, acknowledging their victory while preparing them for the challenges ahead. They had proven that humanity could defend itself against alien aggression, but they had also made enemies of an interstellar empire. "Today we showed that Earth will not be conquered easily," Blake announced. "But this is only the beginning. The enemy will return in greater numbers, and we must be ready for them." Guides' displays showed new patterns as the AI processed the tactical data from the engagement. The artificial intelligence was already analyzing Vashti weaknesses and suggesting improvements to human weapons and tactics. The victory had come at a price beyond the casualties they had suffered. Humanity was now committed to an interstellar war against an enemy that controlled hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. The defiance was powerful, but it was only one vessel against an entire empire. Foster began planning for the next engagement, knowing that the Vashti would not underestimate human capabilities again. Future battles would require new tactics and more advanced weapons as both sides adapted to each other's capabilities. Martinez continued her work with Guide, extracting every piece of information the AI possessed about Vashti military organization and strategy. Dr. Patricia Collins stood in the center of Earth's largest shipyard, watching construction crews work on humanity's growing fleet. 3 years had passed since the first battle with the Vashti, and the abandoned alien ship had become the template for an entire generation of human warships. Each new vessel incorporated lessons learned from combat, becoming more deadly and efficient than the last. The facility stretched for miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, hidden from orbital observation by layers of holographic camouflage developed from alien technology. Massive manufacturing systems, grown from templates found in the original ship, worked constantly to produce materials and components that would have been impossible just years earlier. Collins had been promoted to lead the shipbuilding program, after demonstrating an unusual talent for scaling alien manufacturing processes to industrial levels. The systems that had been designed to maintain a single exploration vessel now churned out dozens of warships optimized for destruction. Captain. Lisa Turner walked through the assembly bay where her new command was taking shape. The UES Retribution was the 37th ship to roll out of the human production lines, and it incorporated 3 years of combat experience and technological innovation. Every system had been tested in battle and refined through multiple iterations. Turner was one of the new generation of officers who had trained specifically for interstellar combat. Unlike the original crew of the Defiance, who had been forced to learn alien technology during wartime, she had grown up with hybrid systems and understood their capabilities instinctively. The war had expanded far beyond Earth's solar system. As human ships began striking Vashti supply lines and military installations throughout their empire, human tactics had evolved from purely defensive to aggressively offensive, with ships working in coordinated wolf packs that could appear anywhere in Vashti space without warning. Guide had been copied into every human warship, providing tactical, intelligence, and real-time analysis of enemy capabilities. The AI had long since overcome its initial horror at human military applications of Kethmori technology, and now served as an eager participant in the war against the Vashatai Empire. Guide is reporting successful raids on 3 more Vashtai supply depots, Collins said, reviewing the latest tactical reports. Our ships are operating deep inside their territory, destroying logistics networks that have supported their empire for centuries. The human approach to interstellar warfare had completely confounded Vashatai military doctrine. Instead of fighting formal battles between large fleets, human ships struck quickly and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. They targeted infrastructure and supply lines rather than attempting to conquer territory. Emperor Korthvan had declared humanity a class extinction threat and mobilized the entire Imperial fleet for a final assault on Earth. Thousands of ships from across the Empire were converging on human space, intent on destroying the species that had shattered their military confidence. But the humans were no longer defending a single world with a single ship. The manufacturing systems had been distributed across multiple hidden facilities, and the fleet had grown to include hundreds of vessels capable of interstellar combat. More importantly, human tactics had proven so effective that several subject species had begun their own rebellions against Vashatai rule. Ryan Blake commanded the Defiance from the bridge that had become his second home. The original ship had been extensively modified and upgraded, but it remained the flagship of humanity's growing fleet. He stood before displays showing the positions of over 200 human warships, all ready for the final confrontation with the Vashtai Empire. All ships report ready for combat operations, Foster announced from her position at the tactical station. She had been promoted to Fleet Tactical Coordinator, responsible for coordinating the weapons of dozens of ships in simultaneous attacks. The target was Korthvan Prime, the capital world of the Vashtai Empire and home to their most powerful fleets. A direct assault on the Imperial homeworld would either end the war decisively or result in humanity's complete destruction. Blake had chosen to take that risk rather than continue a prolonged conflict that could last for decades. Guides displays showed tactical analysis of the enemy fleet defending their capital system. Over 800 Vashtai warships formed multiple defensive lines around their homeworld, supported by orbital fortifications and planetary defense systems that had never been seriously tested. Guide estimates our chances of success at approximately 30%, Martinez translated from her interface station. The AI is recommending that we reconsider this approach and continue with smaller-scale attacks. Blake had heard similar advice from many of his human officers, but he understood something that Guide did not. Humanity's advantage lay in unpredictability and technological innovation. A prolonged war would give the Vashtai time to adapt and develop countermeasures for human weapons. Turner commanded the lead squadron as the human fleet approached Korthvan Prime through hyperspace corridors mapped by captured alien navigation data. Her ships were equipped with the latest versions of human-designed weapons, including gravity manipulation systems that could tear apart enemy vessels at the molecular level. The manufacturing systems aboard each ship continued producing ammunition and replacement components even as they traveled toward battle. The aliens had designed their technology for exploration and scientific research, but humans had transformed it into the most efficient war machine in galactic history. The first phase of the battle began when human ships emerged from hyperspace, in formations designed to maximize their firepower while minimizing their exposure to enemy weapons. Instead of the frontal assault the Vashatai expected, the humans struck from multiple directions simultaneously. Foster coordinated the fleet's weapons through quantum communication links that allowed instantaneous coordination across the entire battle space. Hundreds of ships fired as a single unified weapon, concentrating their attacks on specific targets with devastating effectiveness. The Vashtai defensive lines collapsed within minutes as human weapons carved through ships and fortifications that had been considered impregnable. Kinetic projectiles fired at relativistic speeds shattered orbital platforms, while energy weapons designed by human engineers overloaded enemy shields and armor. Emperor Korthvan watched the destruction of his fleets from his palace on the planet's surface, finally understanding the true scope of the threat humanity represented. The beings he had dismissed as primitive savages had not only matched Vashtai technology, but had improved it beyond recognition. The climactic moment came when Turner's squadron penetrated the inner defensive perimeter and began attacking the planet's military command centers. The Retribution's weapons systems, enhanced with 3 years of combat experience, systematically destroyed the installations that coordinated Vashtai resistance throughout the Empire. Guide provided real-time tactical analysis as the battle progressed, but even the AI was amazed by the effectiveness of human coordination and innovation. The species that had once struggled to understand basic alien technology was now demonstrating military capabilities that exceeded anything in Vashtai experience. The collapse of the Vashtai Empire began not with the destruction of their fleets, but with the failure of their military doctrine. Subject species throughout their territory recognized that Vashtai invincibility was an illusion, and rebellions erupted on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. Blake received surrender communications from dozens of Vashtai commanders as their fleet structure disintegrated under human attack. The empire that had dominated this region of space for over 1,000 years was falling apart in a matter of hours. Collins monitored the battle from Earth's command center, watching real-time updates from the fleet show the systematic destruction of Vashtai resistance. The manufacturing systems continued their work, already beginning production of ships designed for peacekeeping rather than conquest. The war ended not with the conquest of Vashtai territory, but with the complete transformation of the galactic power structure. Humanity emerged as a major interstellar force, not through territorial expansion, but through the demonstration that freedom was possible and oppression could be resisted. Guide served as humanity's ambassador to the liberated Kethemori, helping to establish peaceful relations between species that had never imagined freedom from Vashtai dominance. The AI often reflected on the irony that the gentlest species it had known had created the most effective weapons against tyranny. Turner stood on the bridge of the Retribution as it patrolled the former Vashtai capital system, now protected by human ships and governed by a coalition of formerly subject species. The transformation from single-planet civilization to galactic power had taken less than 5 years. The final scene of humanity's emergence showed construction beginning on the first generation of purely human-designed starships. These vessels incorporated everything learned from alien technology, but were built according to human principles of adaptability, innovation, and the absolute refusal to accept limitations. Blake visited the original crash site in Alaska, now transformed into a memorial for the researchers who had first discovered the alien ship.